World War I was a turning point for Freud, no less than the world. The slaughter confirmed his worst ideas about the dark side of the unconscious and the psychology of human beings.
World War I frightened Freud tremendously. First of all, you have to remember that all three of his sons were enlisted in the Austrian army. Meanwhile, he's hearing of hundreds and thousands of people being killed in these battles, and certainly I think the impact of these kinds of forces made him look through a glass darkly at man's aggressive potential, because before him he saw it realized.
The war hit Freud hard on a personal as well as philosophical level. He spent the winters shivering in his unheated study trying to work. Things got so bad that Freud demanded to be paid for one piece of writing in potatoes. Hard times continued after the war. Freud's favorite daughter, Sophie, died of malnutrition and pneumonia in 1920. 6 weeks after her death, he published one of his darkest and most controversial works, Beyond the Pleasure Principle. In it, Freud argued that there is a drive in humans beyond libido, an aggressive drive, a death drive.
He developed his two-part theory of eros and thanatos. Thanatos being the aggressive, the destructive drive, which he then posited as just as instinctive a part of the human being as eros, the loving, constructive drive.
He now starts to posit after the First War the death instinct, that man has a primary need to destroy himself if left unfettered.
Another blow came in 1923 when Freud developed a cancerous tumor in his mouth and had to have a large piece of his jaw removed, the first of 33 surgeries in 16 years. Freud had to wear a prosthesis so large it was called the monster, separating his sinus from his jaw. Excruciatingly painful, it had to be removed and cleaned every day, and a special room at Bergassa 19 was prepared for these operations.
Grandfather suffered from cancer in the mouth, which very much influenced his life. He had difficulties speaking, he had difficulties eating. It made him more detached. I mean, you wouldn't go and sit on his knee, for instance.
Despite the cancer, Freud could not break his addiction to cigars, an astonishing failure by the most famous therapist in the world.
He said that he needed to smoke in order to be productive and creative. So I guess that was more important to him than healing his cancer.
The cigar was a solace. The cigar was something, when you suck, you've got something that you love. You've got the original source of nurturing when you suck. Now, Freud's analysis, which was a breakthrough, was limited. I think Freud's addiction was never analyzed, and it killed him.
By the 1920s, Sigmund Freud was a household name, the most famous psychiatrist in the world. His mystique was so great that a Chicago paper offered him $25,000 to psychoanalyze Leopold and Loeb, two wealthy teens who killed a friend for kicks. And Hollywood mogul Sam Goldwyn flew to Vienna in 1924 to offer Freud, the greatest love specialist in the world, in Goldwyn's words, $100,000 to consult on scripts.
Freud turned it down cold, made headlines. He just wasn't interested in that. But that shows you that Freud, in popular perception, was a mystical guru, a person who, in some special, fantastic way, knew the truths about human beings and could find out about people.
Not all human beings, as it turned out. One subject Freud never really understood was women, or as he called them, the dark continent. Freud posed a famous question: what do women want? But his own answers were dissatisfying and offensive.
The essential critique of Freud is that Freud thought that you were a superior human being if you had a penis and not if you didn't.
For women, the bedrock is their penis envy. won't they always feel inferior because they lack this magnificent organ? It's a statement to the effect that a woman about the age of 30 is so rigid she can't change. Then, of course, there's a statement that a woman has a defective superego. I mean, where is the way out from this kind of a statement?
Freud, of course, didn't have much intimate contact with women. After his wife, he was closest to and increasingly dependent on his youngest daughter, Anna, who also became a psychoanalyst. Too close, perhaps. In 1918, Freud broke a psychoanalytic rule when he secretly began to analyze his daughter.
Freud psychoanalyzed his own daughter, which I see as a form of intellectual or emotional incest. She was his nurse, his secretary, his daughter. Certainly was as close a relationship between two human beings. There was no sex, so that was the only thing that there wasn't.
If you think that the goal of parenthood is to nurture a unique person and set them free, clearly that was not what happened in this relationship, because she remained very much his handmaiden. Since he, by his own belief and theory, felt that sons wanted to kill their fathers and take their place, he created his successor in his daughter, by whom he must have been much less threatened.
When Hitler came to power in Germany in 1933, Freud's worst fears about the dark forces of the unconscious were realized. Here was psychosis of the most extreme kind on a mass scale. Not surprisingly, Freud's books were among the first that Hitler burned.
What progress we are making. In the Middle Ages, they would have burned me. Nowadays, they are content with burning my books.
One of those books was Freud's most recent and bleak, Civilization and Its Discontents. In it, he probed the psychic war between culture and barbarism.
The older Freud got, the more pessimistic he became, because all the things that he had hoped that the civilized restraints of society could bring about were now beginning to break down. In other words, animal man had organized himself in the form of these extreme political parties that were threatening to destroy the world.
Despite that threat, Freud was still able to take summer vacations in the Austrian countryside. His favorite pastimes were reading, playing with his dogs, and gathering flowers. On September 14, 1936, the Freuds celebrated their golden wedding anniversary. Now 80 years old, Freud was still very much the center and the head of his large and extended family.
We all were very close to him and depended on him very much. I mean, he was a provider in every way, you know, financially, spiritually. He was a provider. He was Moses.
On March 13, 1938, Germany annexed Austria, and Hitler marched into Vienna. Despite the growing danger, Freud refused to leave.
He thought that he could, you know, live out his life in Vienna, and that it would blow over. He had many friends in very high places, so he was very sheltered. I mean, he was the most sheltered Jew in Austria. And I don't exaggerate that.
Freud needed all the protection he could get. On March 14, 1938, Nazi thugs ransacked Bergasse 19 and made off with over $1,500. "I never got that much for a house call," Freud commented after they left. A week later, the Gestapo paid a visit and arrested Anna Freud, who spent a dangerous day at Gestapo headquarters. The top U.S. diplomat in Vienna cabled the White House. Fear Freud, despite age and illness, in danger. Finally, Freud agreed to leave.
He didn't want to leave.